Hey, it's Yandai here, strategic coach at the University of San Diego for League of Legends, and we're going to be going over the basics of draft. So, the goals of a good draft are to pick strong champions that are on the same theme with each other. For example, poke champions all have the same theme with each other, like Ezreal, Zoe, Vel'Koz, something like that. Pick champions with themes that do well against the enemy themes. So if the enemy is picking a lot of engage, you want to be picking disengage, like Gragas, Ezreal, etc. And the final one, ban champions with themes that are good into your composition. So if you are picking Rakan, Aatrox, and stuff like this that goes into the enemy team, you want to be banning Cassiopeia and Veigar, which are very anti-engage. So let's compare these two team compositions here. You can see the blue team picking very aggressive, a composition that falls off late. Aatrox has to go into the enemy team. He can't really split push. Jarvan has to EQ into fights. LeBlanc's Wing in, Rakan's ulting in, and Zai is trying to keep up with her team, doing DPS, and maybe counter enemy engage with her ultimate. But if you see, this red team has drafted very flexible champions and not much engage because or not much engage so that Zaya's ultimate is actually less effective because they have a lot of red team has a lot of AoE controlling ultimates, so like Gragas has ultimate, Gangplank has ultimate slow, and Taric has a very controlling ultimate, so Zaya's ultimate has less value against this red team. As the game goes on, red team will scale into the late game, while blue team doesn't actually do that well. So you can see this enemy composition, they ban stuff like Cassiopeia, Veigar, and Malzahar because this composition wants to go into the enemy team. And any of these champions on this team would be very bad for this team. But overall, red team has a much better composition, scales into late game, has many modes, and yeah. So let's actually go over how to actually pick champions. So here you have blue and red team. So early on, you want to think of draft as a funnel. So a funnel as in it's um, it's very wide at the top, and as the game as the draft goes, as you get to the later picks, it funnels into a very specific team composition. So let's go here and talk about this. So the early picks, you want to pick champions that are very flexible. Um, and what I mean by that is that they have many styles. So let's look at Gragas. Gragas is a very strong champion here because he has many modes. He can engage with his ultimate, he can disengage with his ultimate. He can E flash for strong early ganks. He can be an AP threat on your team. He he scales into late game because of how valuable his ultimate is and how low his CDs are in fights. You can body slam multiple times in team fights. Versus a champion like Jarvan, who does have a lot of zone control, um, but falls off late because in a fight he loses a lot of steam. After his ultimate, he becomes not very strong and is a very bursty champion. So as the fight goes on, he becomes more and more useless. He can only go in, and his disengage isn't is kind of non-existent. So you want to be picking champions more like Gragas early in the draft because he can play into many modes, and that fits into one of the goals of draft that I was talking about earlier, is picking champions that are on theme with each other. So if you pick champions with a very wide theme that can fit into many compositions like Gragas, you're not locking yourself into a specific playstyle for the rest of the draft. Whereas if you pick Jarvan early on, you have to pick champions that go into the enemy team. So let's say this happens, you start picking like Rakan. This is very engage heavy. Um, and now the blue team gets to respond with a very controlly pick like Ezreal Taric. And now this composition is already countering this composition because this red team wants to engage into this team, but they have tools of countering the engage with Taric ultimate, Gragas ultimate. Ezreal has E to counter all of Jarvan's engage. So now this composition is already in a good spot. Other first pick champions maybe are Aphelios because he's the jack of all trades AD. He can kind of do everything. He can poke, engage. He has sustain fights. He's very bursty. He has a lot of damage. Misfortune because she has a lot of damage. Her ultimate can be used from different multiple ranges. She can play on multiple ranges because of her how her E and her R work. How her bounce works actually gives her a lot of effective range. Um, let's see. Gragas is very good. Ornn is very good because you can use his ultimate as disengage, engage. He's a tank. He scales in the late game. He's CC for your team. Um, Stuff like that. And Soraka, because Soraka is a very strong pick. She could be taken top. She can be taken support. She can take in mid. So because of these, a lot of flex picks are actually very good because you can flex them into different lanes. So as the draft goes on, so let's go back to this Gragas. And as the draft goes on, you want to be picking champions that are themed. So now if we have this type of draft, red team wants to ban champions that are good into this comp. So yeah, as I said before, you want to ban the Cassio, the Vegars, stuff like that. While blue team wants to be banning champions that are very hard to engage, that it's very hard to counter. So maybe you don't want to play against Ornn because since your team already hard outscales the enemy team, likely Ornn will probably already be banned by the red team because first pick is very strong. But let's say it wasn't banned and it got through here. Ornn would be banned because Ornn is a very recalibrating pick. So for example, if they pick Ornn, now their team composition already suddenly has a scaling component in it, and can a scaling that can rival this scaling. So that's why they want to ban that. Stuff like uh, Aphelios, because OP and stuff like that. Soraka, stuff that can basically outvalue and outscale this team. You want to be banning this stuff. So yeah, so that's the basis of that. And as the draft goes on, you can pick more specific themed picks. So now that you have this, you don't want to pick themes that fight into this, right? So you don't want to pick like super hard engage like Leona Nautilus, because that's kind of what they want to do. Nautilus is a good counter to Rakan, but Taric is kind of a better pick because of his overall theme. But you can pick champs so you can play on Ezreal's poke theme and pick Vel'Koz, and maybe even like Nilly, for example, for jungle or something, uh, or um, or like a Gangplank, right? So like this, now you have a composition um, that counters, and then we have what did we pick before? Um, what's the top lane? Aatrox. So now let's say you have this, right? Let's say you have this composition as red team, and you have your final pick. So you wouldn't want to pick a Zoe here, for example. Why? Because Zoe is off theme from everyone else. So if, for example, if blue team bans Zoe, this would be a mistake because picking Zoe is actually very off theme. So this composition wants to engage super hard into the blue team, but Zoe wants to poke and find picks, which this composition not doesn't really want to do overall. So picking a Zoe here would be off theme and kind of not make sense. Same with like a Victor pick. A Victor pick, for example, would be very poor here. Azir can actually play different modes, so he can stand his ground similar to like a Xayah and ult, and the Shurima shuffle can actually be very similar to this. So maybe a Azir would be more on themed than a Zoe here. So yeah, this is just stuff I want to talk about. This is like the basics of draft and stuff like that. Um, See you in the next one.